The weight of medals on my chest felt heavier than usual that morning as I adjusted my uniform in the mirror. 67 years of life etched into my face, each wrinkle a battle, each grey hair a sacrifice. I am Colonel James Sullivan, and for 30 years I served my country across battlefields that most civilians only read about in history books or see sanitized on their television screens. Vietnam, Desert Storm, Iraq. I've seen humanity at its worst and its most courageous. But no mission ever prepared me for the war I was about to face on what should have been one of the happiest days of my life. I remember the exact moment I received the intelligence. It was a Tuesday, raining in Virginia, the kind of steady downpour that makes everything feel like it's underwater. I was sitting in my cabin in the Blue Ridge Mountains, the only place that ever felt like peace after decades of chaos. The phone rarely rang there. When it did, it was usually Bobby Martinez, my brother-in-arms who'd saved my life more times than I care to count. "Sullivan," I answered, my voice still carrying the command of a man who'd directed troops through hellfire. "Jimmy," Bobby said, using the nickname only he was permitted to use, "she's getting married." I didn't need to ask who. In 30 years of military service, I'd never felt my heart drop like it did in that moment. Eliza, my daughter, my only child. The little girl who once wore my oversized military cap around the house, pretending to be Colonel Eliza, long before she learned to hate everything the uniform represented. 15 years had passed since I'd last seen her. 15 birthdays, 15 Christmases, a high school graduation, a college diploma, and now a wedding, all milestones marked on my calendar, but experienced only through photographs sent reluctantly by acquaintances or discovered through painful hours of searching social media accounts that had blocked me. The invitation never came. Of course it didn't. Why would it? To Eliza, I was the father who chose duty over daughter, country over family. The man who missed recitals for reconnaissance missions, who was deployed during her mother's cancer scare, who wasn't there when Margaret finally had enough and filed divorce papers while I was halfway around the world, unable to defend myself or explain. What Eliza never knew, what she couldn't know, was that every absence had a purpose far beyond what she could imagine. Every missed moment was a sacrifice made not just for country, but ultimately for her. "The Arlington estate," Bobby continued, his voice bringing me back to the rain-soaked present. "This Saturday at 2 p.m., she's marrying some hotshot tech CEO named Nathan Reynolds." The name struck me like a physical blow. Nathan Reynolds, the very name I'd been seeing in classified briefings for the past 5 years, the name attached to documents that would make any true patriot's blood boil. "You still there, Jimmy?" Bobby asked after my prolonged silence. "I'll be there," I said, my decision made before conscious thought could intervene. "You sure that's wise? Last I heard, she made it pretty clear she never wanted to see you again." I ran my fingers over the scars on my left hand, shrapnel from a firefight in Fallujah. "Some battles you choose, Bobby. Others choose you." That was 3 days ago. Now, as I stand before the mirror in my dress blues, I wonder if I'm making the biggest tactical error of my life. The intelligence I've gathered, the operation I've been part of, it all comes down to this day, to her day. The irony isn't lost on me that after facing death in jungles, deserts, and mountains across the globe, I'm most afraid of the rejection in my daughter's eyes. The drive to Arlington Estate feels like the longest journey of my life, longer than the endless patrol routes in Vietnam, longer than the desert marches under a punishing sun. Each mile brings me closer to a confrontation I've both dreaded and prepared for since the moment I learned the truth about Nathan Reynolds and his company. I see the estate long before I reach it, a grand colonial mansion set against the Virginia countryside, white columns gleaming in the afternoon sun, American flags fluttering in a gentle breeze. The symbolism is almost too perfect, a beautiful facade hiding ugly secrets, just like the man my daughter is about to marry. The parking attendant, a young man barely old enough to vote, looks at me with a mixture of respect and uncertainty when I pull up in my modest sedan. "Sir, are you here for the Sullivan-Reynolds wedding?" "I am." The words feel strange in my mouth. Sullivan Reynolds, my daughter carrying forward my name while joining it with a traitor's. "Are you with the bride or groom's side?" he asks. The standard question that carries so much more weight than he could possibly understand. I look at him directly, my military-bearing automatic after decades of service. I'm the bride's father. His eyes widen slightly as he takes in my uniform, the rows of ribbons and medals, the silver eagle on my shoulder. "Oh, I'm sorry, sir. I didn't realize the family parking is closer to the entrance." Family parking. As if a designated parking space could make me family again. As I walk toward the ceremony, I notice the security. Men in dark suits with earpieces trying to look like wedding staff. Reynolds people, no doubt. They notice me immediately, hands moving instinctively toward concealed weapons before recognition dawns in their eyes. They know who I am, just as I know who they are. We're all playing parts in the same dangerous production. The garden where the ceremony is being held is picture perfect, with rows of white chairs divided by an aisle strewn with rose petals. Guests in expensive attire mingle, champagne flutes catching the sunlight. I recognize no one. These are not my people, not my world. They belong to the life Eliza built without me, the life she chose when she cut me out of her heart. I stand at the back, partially hidden by a flowering dogwood tree, watching. Waiting. My heart pounds with a rhythm unfamiliar to a man accustomed to keeping calm under enemy fire. Then I see her, my little girl, now a woman of 28, stunning in white silk and lace. For a moment, she looks so much like her mother that my breath catches. The same determined chin, the same graceful neck, the same eyes that once looked at me with adoration rather than disdain. She hasn't noticed me yet, but others have. Whispers spread through the crowd like wildfire. Heads turn. The music falters. And then, like a heat-seeking missile finding its target, Eliza's eyes lock onto mine across the garden. Time stops. In that eternal moment, I see every emotion cross her face. Shock, confusion, anger, and something deeper that might be pain or might be fear. I want to call out to her, to explain everything, to tell her that every moment I've been away has been leading to this day, this revelation. But before I can move, before I can speak, her face hardens into something I barely recognize. "You!" Her voice cuts through the murmuring crowd like a combat knife. "What are you doing here? We don't need you here, you crazy old man. Get out of here now!" The garden falls silent. 200 pairs of eyes fix on me, the uninvited father, the unwanted soldier standing at attention in a battlefield of flowers and finery. I feel the weight of their judgment, their curiosity, their pity. But none of it matters compared to the hatred burning in my daughter's eyes. I take one step forward, then another, not retreating, never retreating. Behind me, I sense rather than see Bobby and the others moving into position, right on schedule. The operation is in motion now, unstoppable as an incoming tide. What happens in the next few moments will change everything. For Eliza, for Reynolds, for national security, and for the father-daughter relationship I've dreamed of rebuilding. What my daughter doesn't realize, what she couldn't possibly know, is that I've prepared for this moment more thoroughly than any military campaign. The old soldier before her isn't just a father seeking reconciliation. I'm her salvation and Reynolds' reckoning. The first time I killed a man was in a rice paddy outside Da Nang. I was 22, barely old enough to buy a beer back home, but old enough to watch the light fade from another human being's eyes. I remember the weight of his body slumping against mine, the copper smell of blood mixing with the earthy scent of mud and vegetation. I remember thinking that nothing would ever be the same again. I was right, but standing there in my dress blues at my daughter's wedding, watching her face contort with rage at the mere sight of me, I realized that some wounds cut deeper than any battlefield injury. The chasm between us stretched wider than any ocean I'd crossed during my 30 years of service. My retirement from active duty came without ceremony or celebration. After 3 decades of following orders, leading men into combat, and serving a country that many had come to question, I simply signed the papers, packed my meager belongings, and walked away from the only life I'd ever truly understood. The transition was jarring, from the structured discipline of military life to the untethered freedom of civilian existence. I bought the cabin in the Blue Ridge Mountains with my pension and savings, a small sanctuary far from the chaos I'd known for so long. It sat on 3 acres of woodland, with a creek running along the eastern property line. In the mornings, deer would come to drink from the clear water, unafraid of the broken soldier watching from his porch. At night, the stars seemed close enough to touch, untainted by the light pollution of cities or the smoke of burning villages. It should have been peaceful. It should have been healing. Instead, the silence roared in my ears louder than any artillery barrage. The emptiness of my days stretched before me like an endless desert. Without orders to follow, missions to complete, or men to lead, I found myself adrift, a ship without anchor or compass. And always, there was Eliza. I kept a photograph of her on my nightstand, her high school graduation picture, the last image I had of her before she cut me out of her life completely. In it, she wore a blue cap and gown, her smile bright, but not quite reaching her eyes. Margaret had sent it to me while I was stationed in Germany, a peace offering of sorts, after one of our many arguments about my absence during crucial moments in our daughter's life. "She asked about you," Margaret had written on the back of the photo. I didn't know what to tell her. What could she have told her? That her father chose duty over family? That he missed her piano recitals because he was tracking insurgents? That he wasn't there for her 16th birthday because 3 of his men had been killed by an IED the day before, and he was writing letters to their families? How do you explain to a child that sometimes love means making impossible choices? I tried, God knows I tried. I wrote letters that went unanswered. I made phone calls that went to voicemail. I sent gifts that were returned unopened. With each rejection, I retreated further into the only world that still made sense to me, the world of duty, honor, and service. Then came the intelligence briefing that changed everything. It was 5 years ago, just as I was settling into retirement. A black SUV pulled up to my cabin on a Tuesday morning. 2 men in suits, the kind of nondescript government-issue suits that scream federal agency, knocked on my door. They had clearances, credentials, and a request from the highest levels of military intelligence. "Colonel Sullivan," the older of the 2 said, "we need to discuss a matter of national security." They showed me photographs, documents, transcripts of recorded conversations. Nathan Reynolds, CEO of Reynolds Technologies, a rising star in the defense contracting world, was selling classified weapons systems designs to foreign powers. His company had been awarded contracts worth billions to develop next-generation battlefield technology, and he was betraying that trust, endangering American troops and compromising national security. "Why come to me?" I asked. "I'm retired. This is a job for active counterintelligence." The younger agent slid another folder across my kitchen table. Inside was a photograph that stopped my heart. Eliza, my Eliza, smiling up at Nathan Reynolds, his arm around her waist as they stood on the steps of what appeared to be an upscale restaurant. "Your daughter has been dating Reynolds for approximately 6 months, the older agent said, his voice clinically detached. "We believe he may be using this relationship to insulate himself from suspicion. Dating the estranged daughter of a decorated war hero creates a certain patriotic image." The rage that filled me was immediate and all-consuming. This man, this traitor, was using my daughter as a shield. He was exploiting her hatred of the military, of me, to protect himself while he sold out the very country I had spent my life defending. "What do you need me to do?" I asked, my decision already made. What followed was 5 years of deep cover work. Not active duty, I was too old, too recognizable for that, but something adjacent to it. I became a consultant, an advisor, a ghost in the machine. I helped track money trails, identify contacts, build the case against Reynolds piece by painstaking piece, all while watching from afar as his relationship with my daughter deepened. I watched through surveillance photos as he took her to expensive restaurants, as they vacationed on private islands, as he presented her with an engagement ring that cost more than my annual pension. Each image was a knife in my heart, not because of jealousy, but because I knew the foundation of their relationship was built on blood money and betrayal. The hardest part was maintaining my distance. More than once, I considered breaking protocol, reaching out to Eliza, warning her about the man she was falling in love with. But doing so would have compromised the operation, potentially allowing Reynolds to escape justice. And so, I remained silent, adding another layer to my daughter's belief that I had abandoned her. Then came the wedding invitation, not sent to me, of course, but intercepted through channels I'd rather not discuss. The Arlington estate, a historic mansion in Virginia's horse country, would host the union of Eliza Sullivan and Nathan Reynolds. The irony was almost unbearable. My daughter marrying a traitor on grounds once walked by the founding fathers of the nation her fiancé was betraying. The operation had been building to this moment. We had enough evidence to arrest Reynolds, but the web of his treachery spread wider than just him. His mother, Charlotte Reynolds, was implicated in the financial aspects of the espionage. And most shocking of all, my ex-wife Margaret had accepted payments from Reynolds to ensure that I remained estranged from Eliza, to reinforce the narrative that I was an unhinged, obsessive soldier unable to adjust to civilian life. The night before the wedding, I sat alone in my cabin, polishing my medals one by one. Each piece of brass and silver told a story. The bronze star from the Gulf War, the Purple Heart from an ambush outside Kandahar, the Legion of Merit for service that remains classified to this day. As I worked, I thought about what these symbols meant to me and what they represented to my daughter. To me, they were reminders of sacrifice, of brotherhood, of moments when ordinary men and women did extraordinary things in service to ideals larger than themselves. To Eliza, they were totems of absence, physical manifestations of all the times I chose duty over her dance recitals, deployments over her graduations, country over family. Could she ever understand that in my mind, these were not separate choices, that I served to protect her, to ensure she could grow up in a world where freedom wasn't just a word, but a lived reality? That every time I boarded a transport plane, bound for some distant conflict, her face was what I carried with me into the darkness. As dawn broke over the mountains, I put on my uniform for what might be the last time. Each button, each ribbon, each insignia, placed with the precision drilled into me at West Point over 45 years ago. I looked in the mirror and saw not just an old soldier, but a father about to fight the most important battle of his life. The battle for his daughter's future, for her safety, for the truth. The drive to Arlington Estate was silent, except for the occasional crackle of the secure radio Bobby had installed in my car. The operation was in motion. Teams were in position. The evidence was prepared. All that remained was for me to play my part, the estranged father, the unwelcome intrusion, the catalyst that would bring everything crashing down. As I approached the estate, I could see the preparations for what must have been a wedding, costing hundreds of thousands of dollars. White tents gleamed on the immaculate lawn. Florists' vans and catering trucks lined the service entrance. Security personnel, some belonging to Reynolds, others our people in disguise, patrolled the perimeter. I parked where directed, straightened my uniform, and stepped into the warm Virginia sunshine. In the distance, I could see guests arriving. Men in expensive suits, women in designer dresses, all coming to witness what they thought would be a fairy tale wedding, but what I knew would be something very different. A young usher approached me, uncertainty in his eyes, as he took in my full dress uniform, the rows of medals, the silver eagle on my shoulder. "Sir, may I help you?" "I'm here for the wedding," I said, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions raging inside me. "Are you with the bride or groom's side?" The The question hung in the air between us, heavy with unspoken complexity. What was I to say? That I was with the side of justice, with the side of truth, with the side that would tear this charade apart before vows could be exchanged. "I'm the bride's father," I said simply. His eyes widened in recognition, not of me personally, but of the situation. Clearly, he'd been briefed that the estranged father might make an appearance, might cause a scene. He glanced nervously toward the main house, perhaps hoping for guidance from someone with more authority than a college student working a weekend job. "Of course, sir," he finally said. "The ceremony is in the garden, just through those gates." I nodded my thanks and walked toward what felt like destiny. Each step on the gravel path seemed to echo with the weight of years lost, opportunities missed, words unspoken between father and daughter. Behind me, I knew Bobby and the team were moving into position, ready to act when I gave the signal. The garden was a vision of elegance, rows of white chairs on the manicured lawn, an arbor draped with white roses, string quartet playing softly as guests found their seats. I remained at the periphery, watching as the wedding party began to assemble near the main house. Bridesmaids in pale blue dresses, groomsmen in tuxedos that probably cost more than my monthly pension. And then I saw her. Eliza, my daughter, emerging from the house in a wedding gown that took my breath away. She had her mother's grace, her mother's beauty, but there was something of me in her too. A certain set to her jaw, a determination in her posture that I recognized from my own reflection. For a moment, just a moment, I was simply a father seeing his daughter as a bride, feeling that bittersweet ache that all fathers must feel at such a milestone. Then reality crashed back. The mission, the betrayal, the years of deception orchestrated by the man she was about to marry. As Eliza took her position with her bridesmaids, her gaze swept across the garden and locked with mine. The recognition was immediate, as was the transformation of her expression from nervous joy to absolute fury. She said something to her maid of honor, handed off her bouquet, and began striding toward me with purpose, her white gown billowing behind her like the sails of a warship bearing down on an enemy vessel. "You!" she shouted, loud enough to silence the string quartet and turn every head in the garden. "What are you doing here? We don't need you here, you crazy old man. Get out of here now." The garden fell silent. 200 pairs of eyes fixed on me, the uninvited father, the unwanted soldier standing at attention in a battlefield of flowers and finery. I felt the weight of their judgment, their curiosity, their pity, but I also felt something else. A calm certainty that I was exactly where I needed to be, doing exactly what needed to be done. Not for myself, not for my relationship with my daughter, but for her safety and for the security of the nation I had sworn to protect. As Eliza stormed toward me, her face a mask of rage and humiliation, I saw Nathan Reynolds emerge from the house behind her. Even at this distance, I could see the calculation in his eyes, the subtle shift in his posture as he assessed the situation and determined how best to use it to his advantage. He had no idea what was coming. None of them did. The moment had arrived. The operation was in motion. And I was about to show my daughter exactly what kind of man her father really was. Not the absent soldier she had grown to resent, but the protector who had been watching over her all along, even when she couldn't see him, even when she didn't want to. My daughter's voice cut through the elegant garden setting like artillery fire across a silent battlefield. The string quartet stopped mid-measure, the cellist's bow suspended in air. 200 guests turned in their seats, faces a mosaic of shock, curiosity, and that particular brand of delight people feel when witnessing someone else's family drama. "You have no right to be here," Eliza continued, her wedding dress rustling as she advanced toward me. The sun caught the diamonds in her tiara, sending prisms of light dancing across her contorted face. 15 years of silence, and you show up now? Today of all days?" I remained at attention, my posture forged through decades of military discipline. My hands didn't shake. My voice, when I finally spoke, didn't waver. "Eliza," I said, just her name, nothing more. a peace offering, a white flag. She stopped 3 feet from me, close enough that I could smell her perfume. Something floral and expensive, nothing like the strawberry shampoo she'd used as a child. Close enough that I could see the mascara beginning to smudge at the corners of her eyes. "Don't!" she hissed. "Don't you dare Eliza me like we have some kind of relationship. You lost that right when you chose your precious war over your family." Behind her, Nathan Reynolds approached, his hand coming to rest possessively on her shoulder. He was handsome in the way of men who've never known true hardship, his face unweathered, his hands unmarked by labor or combat. His tuxedo probably cost more than my entire wardrobe, tailored to disguise the softness of a man who'd never carried a rucksack through mountain passes or a wounded comrade through enemy fire. "Is there a problem here, sweetheart?" he asked, his voice a perfect blend of concern and authority. He didn't look at me directly, a calculated insult that didn't escape my notice. "My father," Eliza said, spitting the word like poison, "has decided to crash our wedding." Now Reynolds turned to face me, extending his hand with the confidence of a man who believes money can purchase anything, including respect. "Mr. Sullivan," he said, deliberately omitting my rank, "I'm Nathan Reynolds. I've heard stories about you." I didn't take his hand. Instead, I looked into the eyes of the man who'd been selling American military secrets to the highest bidder, the man who'd used my daughter as both shield and sword against suspicion. I saw nothing there but calculation and contempt. "Colonel Sullivan," I corrected quietly, "United States Army, retired." His smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Of course, Colonel. Forgive the oversight." From the corner of my eye, I could see Bobby Martinez moving into position near the sound system. Our other operatives were blending with the catering staff, the security detail, the photographers. The trap was nearly set. "Perhaps this isn't the best time for a family reunion," Reynolds continued, his voice pitched to carry to the watching guests. "Why don't we arrange something after the honeymoon? I'm sure Eliza would appreciate—" "I wouldn't appreciate anything," Eliza interrupted. "I want him gone, now." She turned to the security personnel, Reynolds' men, not ours, who were already moving toward us. "Escort him out." One of them, a broad-shouldered man with a military haircut and the unmistakable bearing of private security, stepped forward. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises." I recognized him immediately. Former Staff Sergeant Donovan, dishonorably discharged after an incident in Baghdad that had been quietly buried under redacted reports and sealed testimonies. Of course, Reynolds would hire men with questionable pasts and uncertain loyalties, men who could be bought. "I'm not leaving," I said simply. Eliza's face flushed with anger. "This is exactly why I cut you out of my life. You never listen. You never respect boundaries. It's always about what you want, what you think is right." Her words struck deeper than any physical blow, because in her mind they were true. In her reality, the reality carefully constructed by Reynolds, by Margaret, by years of selective information and deliberate misinformation, I was exactly what she described. A controlling, obsessive soldier, unable to adapt to civilian life, unable to be the father she needed. "Eliza," I said again, fighting to keep my voice steady, "there are things you don't know, things about Nathan." "Oh, God," she interrupted with a bitter laugh that sounded nothing like the child I remembered. "Here we go. Let me guess. You've been investigating my fiancé? You've discovered he's some kind of criminal? Or maybe a spy? That's always been your excuse, hasn't it? The mission, the greater good, the threats only you can see." Reynolds placed his arm around her waist, a gesture of support that made my skin crawl. "Sweetheart, your father clearly isn't well. PTSD is a serious condition, especially in veterans of his generation who didn't receive proper treatment." He turned to me with practiced sympathy. "Colonel, I understand your concern for your daughter. It's natural, but I assure you, I love Eliza very much. I'm going to take good care of her." The irony of his statement would have been almost comical if it weren't so infuriating. This man, this traitor, speaking to me about taking care of my daughter when his actions had put her and countless others at risk. When his wealth, the very money funding this lavish wedding, came from selling out the country I had spent my life defending. I looked past them to the gathered guests, most of whom were watching with undisguised interest. Among them, I spotted Margaret, my ex-wife, looking elegant in pale blue but distinctly uncomfortable. Our eyes met briefly before she looked away, guilt written in the tense line of her shoulders. Next to her sat Charlotte Reynolds, Nathan's mother, a woman whose financial expertise had helped launder millions in payments from foreign intelligence services. She was watching the confrontation with calculating eyes, no doubt already spinning damage control scenarios in her head. The security guard, Donovan, stepped closer. "Sir, don't make this more difficult than it needs to be." I could feel the situation escalating exactly as planned. The scene I was creating was drawing everyone's attention, focusing all eyes on the drama unfolding by the garden entrance. No one was watching the perimeter, where our people were quietly moving into position. No one noticed the catering staff members who weren't actually catering staff, or the slight changes in the audio equipment that Bobby was implementing. "You know what?" Eliza said suddenly, her voice rising. "This is exactly what you want, isn't it? To make a scene. To ruin my day, to make everything about you, just like you always have." She turned to address the seated guests directly, her white gown gleaming in the afternoon sun. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for this disruption. Apparently, my father feels that my wedding day is the appropriate time to stage one of his dramatic interventions. The humiliation was calculated, deliberate. She wanted to hurt me as she felt I had hurt her. I understood that. I even accepted it. Because in moments, everything would change. For those of you who don't know," she continued, her voice carrying across the garden, "my father is Colonel James Sullivan, war hero, patriot, and completely absent father who now thinks he can walk back into my life whenever it suits him." Some of the guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Others watched with the same fascination people show for car wrecks on highways. "He missed my graduation," Eliza said, warming to her subject now. "He missed my mother's cancer treatments. He missed every single important moment of my life because he was always off fighting someone else's war, and now he wants to pretend he cares about who I marry." Each accusation hit like physical blows. The worst part was that on the surface they were all true. I had missed those moments. I hadn't been there when she needed a father. The reasons, the classified operations, the counterintelligence work that had kept me away even when I wasn't deployed, none of that could be explained, not without compromising national security. And so I stood there and took it. Every word, every accusation. I had endured torture in a North Vietnamese prison camp as a young lieutenant. I had been shot twice and stabbed once over the course of my career. But nothing hurt like standing there while my only child renounced me in front of strangers. Reynolds was watching me carefully, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. He was enjoying this, the public humiliation of a decorated officer, the breaking down of a man he saw as a potential threat. He didn't know that every moment he gloated was another moment for our operation to move into its final phase. "We don't need you here, you crazy old man." Eliza was nearly shouting now, tears of rage streaming down her face, ruining the careful makeup that had no doubt taken hours to apply. "Get out of here now!" Donovan placed his hand on my arm. "Sir, you've heard the lady. Time to go." I looked directly at my daughter, memorizing her face. Even in anger, even in hatred, still the most precious thing in my world. "Eliza, I have never stopped loving you. Not for one day, not for 1 hour. Everything I have ever done has been to protect you. Protect me." She laughed, a brittle sound like breaking glass. "From what? From happiness? From having a normal life with a father who actually showed up? From men like him," I said quietly, nodding toward Reynolds. His practiced smile faltered for just a moment. A flash of something, concern, perhaps even fear, crossed his face before he composed himself. "I think we've all heard enough," Reynolds said, his voice hardening. "Donovan, escort Colonel Sullivan off the property. If he resists, call the police." Donovan's grip tightened on my arm. Another security guard appeared at my other side. I could have broken free. Despite my age, I maintained the fitness and training of a career soldier, but that wasn't the plan. "You're making a mistake, Eliza," I said, allowing myself to be turned toward the exit. "There are things you don't know." "The only mistake I made was hoping you might have changed," she called after me, "that you might just once put me before your paranoid delusions." As I was led away, I heard Reynolds comforting her, playing the role of supportive fiancé to perfection. "It's okay, sweetheart. He's gone now. Let's get back to our perfect day." The security guards marched me down the garden path toward the parking area, their grips professional but firm. Donovan leaned close as we walked. "You should have stayed away, old man," he murmured. "Some situations you can't fix with medals and war stories." I said nothing. We had nearly reached my car when Bobby Martinez appeared, dressed as one of the valets. "Problem here, gentlemen?" he asked, his posture casual but his eyes alert. Donovan glanced at him dismissively. "Just escorting an unwanted guest to his vehicle." Bobby nodded, pulling a set of keys from his pocket. "I can take it from here. Mr. Reynolds wants you back at the ceremony ASAP. Something about additional security for the gift table." The guards exchanged glances, then Donovan shrugged. "He's all yours. Make sure he leaves the property." They released me and headed back toward the garden. Bobby waited until they were out of earshot before speaking. "That was quite a performance, Jimmy," he said, his voice soft with sympathy. "You okay?" I rubbed my arm where Donovan's fingers had dug in. "I've had worse. She didn't mean it. She doesn't know. She meant every word, Bobby, and that's on me." I straightened my uniform jacket, adjusting medals that had shifted during my escort from the premises. "Are we ready?" Bobby nodded. "Everyone's in position. The system's been modified. All we need is your go-ahead." I looked back toward the garden where my daughter's wedding was resuming. The string quartet had started playing again. Guests were settling back into their seats, no doubt discussing the dramatic scene they'd just witnessed. Eliza would be taking her place at the altar soon, preparing to pledge her life to a man who had betrayed everything I stood for. Everything she would stand for, too, if she knew the truth. "She's going to hate me even more for this," I said quietly. Bobby's hand came to rest on my shoulder, the gesture of a man who'd fought beside me in hell and lived to tell about it. "Maybe at first. But when she knows the truth, that's a different story." I nodded, my decision made. "Do it." Bobby spoke into his concealed microphone, giving the command that would set everything in motion. "Sierra Tango, this is Overlord. Operation Wedding Crasher is a go. I repeat, we are a go." I straightened my spine, squared my shoulders, and prepared for the most important battle of my life. Not for country this time, but for my daughter. For the truth. For redemption, if such a thing was still possible after 15 years of absence. "Let's move," I said, and we headed back toward the garden, not as rejected guests this time, but as soldiers with a mission. The humiliation I had endured was nothing compared to what was coming for Nathan Reynolds. And as painful as this day had been so far, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. It was about to get much, much worse. The garden descended into darkness so suddenly that several guests gasped. One moment, the afternoon sun was illuminating the flower-laden arbor where Eliza and Nathan were to exchange vows. The next, we were plunged into an artificial night as the power cut and backup generators failed to engage. In the confused murmuring that followed, I heard Reynolds barking orders at his security team, his polished veneer cracking under pressure. "Get the power back on now," he hissed. "And find Sullivan." Little did he know I was already returning, moving through the darkness with the confidence of a man who has navigated battlefields by starlight. Bobby walked beside me, our footsteps deliberately heavy on the gravel path. We weren't trying to sneak in. We wanted to be heard, to be anticipated. When the lights suddenly blazed back to life, they were different, brighter, harsher, theatrical. The soft garden illumination had been replaced by powerful floodlights, positioned to create a stage effect around the central ceremony area, and standing in the middle of that stage, caught in the merciless glare, were Nathan Reynolds and my daughter. The string quartet had fallen silent. The catering staff, our people, not Reynolds, had formed a perimeter around the garden, effectively blocking all exits. The wedding guests remained seated, confusion evident on their faces as they tried to understand the sudden shift in atmosphere. "Ladies and gentlemen," Bobby's voice boomed through the sound system he'd modified earlier, "we apologize for the interruption to today's festivities. For security reasons, we ask that everyone remain in their seats." Reynolds spun around, searching for the source of the voice, his face contorted with a mixture of rage and dawning comprehension. He spotted me standing at the entrance to the garden, still in my full dress uniform, and his expression hardened. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded, his voice carrying across the now silent gathering. "This is a private event. You are trespassing." I walked forward slowly, deliberately, my medals catching the harsh light as I moved. Behind me, a line of men and women in dark suits appeared, each wearing the unmistakable earpieces and bearing the subtle but clear indicators of federal agents. "Nathan Reynolds," I said, my voice steady and clear, amplified by the microphone Bobby had secretly attached to my uniform during our brief meeting by the car. "I think it's time we had an honest conversation about who is really trespassing here." Eliza stood frozen beside her fiancé, her wedding dress gleaming under the floodlights, her face a mask of confusion and anger. "Dad, what are you doing? Have you completely lost your mind?" I didn't answer her directly. Instead, I nodded to Bobby, who activated the large screen that descended from the temporarily modified garden trellis. Where minutes before there had been only roses and ivy, now there was a massive display visible to every guest. "For the past 5 years," I continued, addressing the gathered crowd, rather than just my daughter or Reynolds, "I have been part of a counterintelligence operation investigating treason at the highest levels of our defense industry." The screen flickered to life, displaying classified documents with sections highlighted, contracts between Reynolds Technologies and the Department of Defense, security clearances, project specifications for weapons systems that shouldn't have been seen by civilian eyes. Nathan Reynolds has been awarded contracts worth billions of dollars to develop technology meant to protect American soldiers in the field and American interests abroad. Technology paid for by your tax dollars. Technology designed to save lives. Reynolds stepped forward, his charm switching on like a tactical weapon. "Colonel Sullivan, with all due respect, you're interrupting my wedding with classified material. That's a federal offense. Whatever grudge you bear against me for marrying your daughter." "This isn't about my daughter," I cut him off. "This is about the lives you've put at risk." I nodded again, and the display changed, showing surveillance photos of Reynolds meeting with individuals whose faces were blurred, but whose nationalities were clearly indicated in the captions below. Dates, times, locations of meetings that should never have happened. These individuals represent foreign intelligence services from countries not aligned with American interests, countries that have used the information sold to them by Mr. Reynolds to develop countermeasures to our defense systems, countries where American troops have been deployed. A murmur ran through the crowd. From the corner of my eye, I saw Charlotte Reynolds attempting to slip away from her seat, only to be intercepted by one of our agents who politely but firmly guided her back to her chair. "Dad, stop this right now." Eliza's voice cut through the growing tension, her face flushed with embarrassment and rage. "This is insane. Nathan is a businessman, not some spy from a bad movie." I turned to face my daughter directly for the first time since being escorted from the garden. "Eliza, I know you have no reason to trust me. I know I've been absent when you needed me. But today, I'm asking you just once to listen." Something in my voice must have reached her, some note of sincerity or desperation that penetrated the wall of resentment she'd built between us. She fell silent, her eyes locked on mine with a mixture of fury and reluctant curiosity. I gestured to Bobby, who advanced the display to show financial records, complex webs of offshore accounts, shell companies, transactions flowing through digital labyrinths designed to hide their origins and destinations. Reynolds Technologies reported profits of $342 million last year, I explained, my voice steady as I presented the evidence we'd spent years compiling. But these records show additional payments of nearly $500 million flowing into accounts controlled by Mr. Reynolds and his associates. Payments that don't appear in any official company documents. Payments that come from entities traced back to the same foreign intelligence services shown in previous images. The garden was utterly silent now. Even the birds seemed to have stopped singing, as if nature itself was holding its breath. This isn't just corporate espionage or financial fraud, I continued. This is treason. This is the deliberate betrayal of American security for personal profit. This is placing a price tag on the lives of soldiers, soldiers like the men and women I commanded for 30 years. Reynolds' face had lost its practiced charm, his eyes darting around the garden, assessing escape routes, calculating odds. I recognized the look. I'd seen it on cornered enemies from Vietnam to Afghanistan. The look of a man realizing the game is over, but still desperate to find a way out. "These are serious allegations, Colonel," he said, his voice steady despite the sweat beading on his forehead. "Allegations that would require substantial proof in a court of law. Proof I don't believe you have." I smiled for the first time that day, not a warm smile, but the cold expression of a predator who knows his prey is trapped. "You're right about one thing, Nathan. These allegations would require substantial proof. Proof like this." The screen changed again, now showing video footage, high definition, crystal clear, of Reynolds, in what appeared to be a hotel suite, speaking directly to a man whose face was blurred, but whose uniform was unmistakably foreign military. "The guidance systems have a vulnerability in the north by northeast quadrant." Reynolds' voice emerged from the speakers, unnervingly clear. "A 3-second delay that can be exploited if you know exactly where to look. That information alone is worth twice what we agreed on." The foreign officer responded in accented English. "And you can guarantee this vulnerability exists in the deployed systems, not just the prototypes. Every single unit shipped to the Middle East has the same flaw," Reynolds confirmed on the video. "By design, I assure you. Now, about my payment." I gestured, and Bobby froze the video on Reynolds' face, smiling, calculating, utterly without remorse, as he sold out the very troops his company was contracted to protect. A collective gasp ran through the wedding guests. Charlotte Reynolds had gone deathly pale, and Eliza, my daughter, my only child, stared at the screen with an expression of dawning horror that broke my heart, even as it confirmed we were doing the right thing. "No," she whispered, the word barely audible. "No, that can't be real." Reynolds turned to her, desperation replacing calculation. "Eliza, baby, this is all a misunderstanding. Your father has doctored this footage. He's obsessed, can't you see? He's trying to ruin us because he can't stand to see you happy." I nodded to Bobby again, and the screen split into multiple sections, each showing different meetings, different conversations, different betrayals, a mountain of evidence collected over 5 years of painstaking investigation. "We have hundreds of hours of footage," I said quietly. "Audio recordings, financial records, witness testimonies. The investigation is complete, Nathan. It's over." As if on cue, the federal agents began moving forward, surrounding Reynolds in a tightening circle of authority. One of them, a stern-faced woman with short gray hair, stepped forward, holding up credentials. "Nathan Reynolds, I am Special Agent Diana Foster with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. You are under arrest for espionage, treason, fraud, and conspiracy against the United States. You have the right to remain silent." As she continued reciting the Miranda rights, other agents moved through the crowd toward specific targets. Charlotte Reynolds, two groomsmen who were also executives at Reynolds Technologies, and finally, most painfully, toward Margaret. My ex-wife stood before I could say anything, her face a mixture of defiance and resignation. "I suppose you're here for me too, James?" The garden fell completely silent as guests began to understand that this wasn't just about the groom. This conspiracy reached further than anyone had imagined. "Margaret Sullivan," a male agent began, "you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud and accessory after the fact to espionage." Eliza's cry cut through the formal language of law enforcement. Mom, what is happening? What have you done?" Margaret wouldn't meet her daughter's eyes. Instead, she looked at me as the agents handcuffed her wrists. "He offered me financial security, James, something you never could. Do you know how expensive it is to raise a child alone? To put her through college? To give her the life she deserved? So you took his money," I said, the words ash in my mouth. "You took his money, and in exchange, you made sure I remained estranged from my daughter. You reinforced every negative narrative about me. You made sure she would never hear my side of the story. You were never there to tell your side of the story." Margaret shot back, anger momentarily overcoming her shame. "You were always gone, always on some mission, some deployment. Because I was tracking him." I gestured toward Reynolds, who was being led away in handcuffs, his perfect tuxedo incongruous with his current situation. "Because I was protecting our country from men like him, men who would sell out their own people for profit." Eliza stood alone now in her wedding gown, abandoned at the altar not by a groom's cold feet, but by federal agents enforcing laws older than the nation itself. Her bouquet had fallen to the ground, white roses scattered across manicured grass. "I don't understand," she said, her voice small, childlike in its confusion. "Dad, what is happening?" For the first time since entering the garden, I felt my military bearing slip. My shoulders sagged under the weight of not victory, but the cost of that victory. I had won the battle. Reynolds would face justice. His network would be dismantled, lives would be saved. But looking at my daughter's shattered expression, I wondered if I had lost something even more precious in the process. I walked toward her slowly, stopping a respectful distance away. 5 years ago, I was approached by military intelligence. They had evidence that Nathan was selling classified information to foreign powers, information that put American troops at risk. They asked for my help because they had discovered he was dating you. Her eyes widened. "Me? What did I have to do with any of this?" "Nothing and everything." I sighed, the sound of a man carrying decades of secrets. "They believed he was using you, the daughter of a decorated war hero, as cover. Dating you gave him a patriotic image, a shield against suspicion. And when they showed me his plan, when I realized he was using my daughter as a prop in his treason, I agreed to come out of retirement, to help build the case against him." Around us, the garden was emptying as agents escorted key suspects away, and wedding guests fled the scene of what would undoubtedly be tomorrow's headline news. But in the center, illuminated by floodlights like actors on a stage, my daughter and I remained, the final act in a drama 15 years in the making. "All this time," she whispered, "all these years, I thought you didn't care, that you chose your military career over me." "I chose you," I said simply. "Every mission, every deployment, every sacrifice, it was always for you, Eliza. So you could grow up in a world where you were safe. So you could have the freedom to hate me for my choices, if that's what you needed to do." Tears streaked her carefully applied makeup, cutting channels through the foundation that had made her look like a stranger to me. Underneath, I caught glimpses of the little girl who used to wear my cap around the house, who would fall asleep on my chest while I read her stories about brave knights and the dragons they faced. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked. "About Nathan, about the investigation." "I couldn't. It would have put you in danger, and—" I hesitated, then decided she deserved the full truth. "And you wouldn't have believed me, not after all these years of thinking I had abandoned you." She didn't deny it. We both knew it was true. Bobby approached quietly, respecting the fragile moment between us. "Jimmy, we need to wrap this up." The press will be here soon. I nodded, then turned back to my daughter. Eliza, I know this is a lot to process. I know you're hurting, but there's one more thing I need to show you. I reached into my uniform pocket and pulled out a folded document, offering it to her with a steady hand. This is the deed to Arlington Estate. As of this morning, it belongs to you. She stared at the paper, not reaching for it. What? The government has seized Reynolds' assets, including this property, but I made a deal. In exchange for my service these past 5 years, this place would be transferred to you. It was always your dream home. You told me that when you were 12, the last time we visited Virginia together. You said you wanted to live in a house like this someday. The memory seemed to hit her like a physical force. Her hand went to her mouth. You remembered that? After all this time? I remembered everything, Eliza. Every birthday card returned unopened. Every Christmas gift sent back. Every attempt at reconciliation rejected. I remembered, and I kept trying because that's what fathers do. We don't stop loving our children even when they stop loving us. For a long moment, she stood motionless, the ruined ceremony around her a physical manifestation of her shattered illusions. Then slowly, she reached out and took the deed from my hand. Our fingers brushed, the first physical contact between father and daughter in 15 years. It lasted only a moment, but in that brief touch, I felt something shift, some tiny fragment of the wall between us crumbling away. I don't know what to say, she whispered. You don't have to say anything. Not today. I straightened my shoulders, resuming the military bearing that had carried me through decades of service. When you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'll be at my cabin in the Blue Ridge Mountains. The door will always be open for you. I turned to leave, my mission complete, my duty fulfilled, but I had taken only 3 steps when her voice stopped me. Dad! I turned back, hope and fear warring in my chest. Eliza stood tall among the ruins of her wedding, her white dress gleaming under the harsh lights, her face tear-streaked but resolute. In that moment, she looked more like me than she ever had before, a Sullivan facing adversity with spine straight and chin lifted. Thank you, she said, the words simple but carrying the weight of possibility. Not forgiveness, not yet, but something that might, with time and truth, grow into understanding. I nodded once, words failing me for the first time that day. Then I turned and walked away, leaving my daughter to begin rebuilding her life on a foundation of truth rather than lies. The war was over, and for the first time in decades, I allowed myself to hope that peace might finally be possible. They say time heals all wounds, but I've found that truth is the real medicine. It's been 3 years since that fateful day at Arlington Estate. 3 years since I walked away from my daughter standing in her wedding dress among the ruins of a life built on lies. 3 years of slow, painful rebuilding, not just of our relationship, but of her understanding of the world and the people she thought she could trust. The aftermath wasn't easy for any of us. Nathan Reynolds received a 40-year sentence for treason, espionage, and a dozen other charges. His mother, Charlotte, got 15 years for her role in laundering the money. The federal prosecutor called it one of the most significant counterintelligence cases of the decade. I called it justice, plain and simple. Margaret, my ex-wife, served 18 months for her part in the conspiracy. The judge was lenient, considering her cooperation after arrest and the fact that her involvement had been primarily financial rather than directly endangering national security. Still, it broke Eliza's heart to see her mother in prison orange, to visit her behind bulletproof glass. When I returned to my cabin in the Blue Ridge Mountains after the arrests, I didn't expect to hear from my daughter again, at least not anytime soon. The wounds were too fresh, the betrayal too deep, the revelations too overwhelming. I went back to my quiet retirement, fishing in the creek, watching deer at dawn, and waiting for a phone call I wasn't sure would ever come. It took 6 months. 6 months of silence before my phone rang one autumn afternoon as the leaves were turning gold and crimson on the mountainside. I answered without checking the caller ID, and her voice, hesitant, uncertain, but unmistakably hers, nearly stopped my heart. "Dad?" It's Eliza. I think maybe we should talk. That conversation lasted 5 hours. We talked until my phone battery died, and then I called her back from my landline, and we talked some more. She asked questions, hard questions about my service, about the investigation, about why I had stayed away for so long. I answered everything as honestly as I could. No more secrets, no more classified redactions. She told me about her life without me, college at Georgetown, her teaching position, how she'd met Nathan at a fundraiser for veterans, ironically enough. She told me about the dreams she'd had, the life she'd planned, and how it had all shattered in a single afternoon. "I'm living at Arlington now," she said near the end of our marathon conversation. "It feels strange being in this huge place alone, but I'm making it mine, little by little." 2 weeks later, I received an invitation, not engraved on expensive cardstock like her wedding invitations had been, but in her own handwriting on simple stationery. "Dinner at Arlington, Sunday at 6, just us." That dinner was awkward, stilted, both of us feeling our way forward like soldiers navigating a minefield. But we got through it. And then there was another dinner, and another. Weekend visits, holiday celebrations. Small at first, just the two of us, then gradually including friends, creating new traditions to replace the ones poisoned by deception. Today, Arlington Estate is no longer a symbol of Reynolds' blood money or Margaret's betrayal. Eliza has transformed it into a retreat center for veterans suffering from PTSD, a place of healing and reconciliation. The garden where her ruined wedding took place now grows vegetables for a community kitchen that serves homeless veterans. The ballroom hosts therapy sessions and support groups. The guest rooms house soldiers transitioning back to civilian life. And I'm there 3 days a week, working with young men and women who carry the same invisible scars I've borne for decades, sharing my experiences, letting them know they're not alone in their struggles, finding, at last, a way to serve both my country and my family without having to choose between them. Eliza still teaches at Georgetown, but now her courses include a segment on ethics in technology and defense contracting. Sometimes I guest lecture, telling my story to wide-eyed students who were children when I was fighting in deserts half a world away. The road to rebuilding our relationship hasn't been without its setbacks. There are still moments when the old resentments flare, when the muscle memory of 15 years of estrangement reasserts itself. But we're learning day by day to be father and daughter again, to create something new from the wreckage of what was lost. This story, my story, isn't about revenge, despite the name of this channel. It's about justice, truth, redemption. It's about the complicated, messy reality that sometimes doing the right thing comes at terrible personal cost. Sometimes protecting those we love means they might hate us for our choices. If you're watching this and thinking about your own family rifts, your own broken relationships, I won't offer easy platitudes. I won't tell you that time heals all wounds or that forgiveness is always possible. Some bridges once burned cannot be rebuilt. But I will tell you this, truth matters, even when it hurts, even when it costs you everything you thought you wanted. The truth set my daughter free from a marriage to a traitor. It set me free from the burden of secrets I'd carried for decades. And eventually, painfully, it offered us both a chance at something we'd lost, each other. If this story resonated with you, I ask you to take a moment to subscribe to Revenge Expected. There are thousands of stories like mine, tales of justice served, of truth revealed, of long-delayed reckonings, some with happy endings, some without. All of them real, all of them human. Hit that like button if you believe in second chances, in the possibility of rebuilding what was broken. Leave a comment sharing your own experience with family estrangement or reconciliation. What brought you back together, or what keeps you apart? Your stories matter, and this community grows stronger with every shared experience. For those who appreciate the work that goes into bringing these stories to light, please consider supporting the channel through gracious donations. Every contribution helps cover the costs of production, research, and the time it takes to present these complex human stories with the dignity and respect they deserve. Your support means more daily videos, more stories that might otherwise go untold. The world is full of Nathan Reynolds, men and women who believe their actions exist in a vacuum, who place profit above honor, who exploit the trust of others for personal gain. But it's also full of people like my daughter Eliza, who find the strength to rebuild after betrayal, to create meaning from suffering, to transform places of pain into sanctuaries of healing. And perhaps most importantly, it's full of choices, moments when we must decide what we stand for, what we're willing to sacrifice, what legacy we want to leave. I chose duty, honor, country for 30 years. Then I chose truth, justice, and eventually, family. The cost was high, the road was long, but standing now on the other side, watching my daughter change lives at Arlington Estate, I can say without hesitation, it was worth it. This is Colonel James Sullivan, signing off until next time. Remember, revenge may be expected, but redemption, that's something you have to fight for every single day.